Welcome, everyone. Welcome to technically the first WPAMA. This is a weekly series hosted by WP Buffs. My name is Allie Nimmons. I'm your host. In case you don't know, we round up your questions for a week and then get together here live to answer them. Questions are first come, first serve. We have questions that are submitted online via our website, wpbuffs.com/WP-AMA-series. So make sure to check there every week and submit any questions that you have for that speaker. If you're just tuning in and have questions yourself that you didn't get to submit before, please leave them in the chat. And if we have time, we will get to those at the end. We also do a random giveaway at the end of every episode. This week, we're giving away one free item in the WP Buff store. So make sure you stay until the end and you might be chosen. This episode will be available to watch on YouTube, our YouTube channel. And captions will be included on that video as well if you would like them. This week, answering questions about WordPress website hosting is Christie Chirinos. Hi, Christie.
Hi, I'm excited to be here for the first official.
First official.
Yeah.
Christie is the product manager for managed WooCommerce at Liquid Web. Did I get that right? It's a lot of
work.
Cool. And she will be speaking at our WPAMA virtual summit at the end of the month, at the end of September, which is really exciting. And she also happens to be a very good friend of mine. So let's get started with the questions. We did have I'll call dry run on Wednesday where we kind of started with these questions. So Christie has heard the first two, but all of the other ones after that are going to be a surprise. So let's start with the first one, which we're running right in with a big philosophical question. How can good web hosting make the web better?
I remember our big philosophical question from our practice on Wednesday, and I'll answer it the exact same way. I've had 2 days to think about it, and I don't think I've changed my mind, right? And I think that what's interesting about web hosting is that it is a product in your WordPress website stack that's required. Right? Like some people will buy premium themes, some people won't. Some people will buy premium products, some people won't. Some people will buy maintenance plans, some people won't. But absolutely everyone has to have web hosting. That's why the big web hosts are everywhere, because the market share is large, or the market potential, is large. But that also means that the space is super competitive. And when you have super competitive spaces, there's an opportunity to make the web better by pushing the super competitive space in the right direction, right? Because what ends up happening is you have this product that absolutely everyone needs, and so many people are trying to get a cutoff, that if one company really does something right that stands out, it pushes all the other competitors to also do that one thing right. So if we can lead from this base level service into a more secure, faster, and more reliable website sphere, and I think that that's something that gets me really excited about web hosting, right? It's that foundationally, that's the base of everything else that's going on.
Love it. Such a great answer. Next question. What kinds of things can you expect to be inside or outside the scope of a hosting company? What limitations should people look for or be aware of when they're shopping for hosting? Cool. So going back to your very first time ever looking at web hosting, you're not really sure what it should or should not entail. What are those things?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this question similarly to how we did it in the practice run, which is a pretty long answer, right? That I think is really important to understand all the different offerings that are available in web hosting. I think that unless you're in the space or looking closely, you kind of find something that works and you don't know what else is out there in terms of product options and ideas. And I mean, for me, I told you this on Wednesday, right? I've been at Liquid for 1.5 years now. And before that, I was a consumer of web hosting because we all have to have web hosting for all the work that we do. But that didn't really mean that I knew anything about web hosting other than maybe how the brands are known, who the big brands are, and maybe the rough price points. But I didn't really understand what was sitting under the hood. And I remember the month leading up to my first day on the job, I was like on LinkedIn learning, watching all these videos about like Linux, right? Like being like, how does this work? What's a server? What's a VPS? because my job as product manager for Managed WooCommerce is to mostly focus on the relationships and the partnerships that power this sort of like top of the stack type product, just a managed application, right? So the infrastructure aspect of it lies underneath the work that I do, which is that WordPress WooCommerce and value added bundle layer of stuff on top that brings an online store to life. So getting a big lay of the land of the product is actually really interesting, right? I think that maybe on your most simple end, right, when you're looking to put a WordPress website online, is that you're able to get, well, let's back up, right? Like you can, if you want to, sign up for something very bare metal and stand everything up yourself. And at Liquid Web, where we do managed application hosting, we like to talk about that approach as being the to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Step one, plant the peanut tree, right? And yes, technically, right, but it depends on how far you want to go and how much you want to offload some of the work. So certainly that is an option, right? Like we have seen people with unique configuration requirements and the in-house skill for DevOps set up WordPress websites on AWS Hyperscale, and it works really well, and it's super fast, and it's infinitely scalable, and it's all those things, but it does require maintenance. That tends to be an enterprise option for big hitters. And I don't think that that's what we're talking about here. So on our beginning stuff, we probably have something that is shared hosting on a server. It's usually pretty affordable. You usually get something like cPanel on it. And that means that you can do that one-click install of WordPress or whatever other application you're using. And most of the time, your support will be the scope of hosting support, right? So maybe permissions for certain file types, maybe management of storage, maybe management of RAM, maybe restarting server processes when they're overloaded. That's about it. It's a great option for people who are looking for something low cost, who aren't going to be doing lots of mission critical stuff, right? Where if your site goes down for a little bit, it's not the end of the world, right? For example, my personal website, ChristieChirinos.com, is a thing. It just has a quick overview of my resume, some links to my LinkedIn, right? And that's exactly the kind of presentation, brochure, or personal card website that isn't what we would call a mission critical website, right? Surely I don't want my personal website to go offline, but my personal website is not the kind of website where if it went offline for 2 minutes, I'm losing 100 orders because it's a WooCommerce site with lots of traffic. That can be a really great option, especially for people who are getting started as freelancers or making websites or practicing, to have something affordable and, that gives you a lot of access and forces you to learn about WordPress. The next layer after that is the space that we call managed WordPress, right? So I think managed WordPress is something that we tend to think of as sort of being pioneered by Pagely and WP Engine, right? I think maybe Pagely innovated it and WP Engine commoditized it, right? And did it sort of really big and on scale, right? And that means that, hey, WordPress is so big and powers so much of the web. And it is an open source project. So if you have problems with your hosting provider, they can help you with server stuff, but they can help you with WordPress stuff. You have to look at other WordPress stuff. Well, what if we included a service offering that also included WordPress stuff? So now you can write your host and you can say, hey, something's wrong with my website. And they can say, oh, we can figure out your permissions here. We can restart Nginx, or we can, looks like it's an issue with PHP config, right? Or excuse me, wp-config.php. And so that scope of support is what the managed WordPress scope of support is, right? And what's interesting is that first example tends to be called managed hosting in the industry, right? So we start sort of reusing a lot of words, because then you have like managed hosting, and then you have managed hosting, which is managed hosting plus managed WooCommerce, or excuse me, plus managed WordPress. But that's sort of the standard. So today in 2020, right, there's very little reason if you're running a WordPress website to not have a managed WordPress host. I mean, there's just so many little things that can go wrong with a WordPress website that it's going to save you so much money in the long run. And these plans are so affordable At Nexus, right now, you can sign up for $9 a month of managed
Wow.
WordPress support. I mean, like, right? And then when you have something like that, then a maintenance plan, like something with WP Buffs, is actually cheaper. Do I have that right? I believe that WP Buffs is cheaper if you're on managed WordPress and if you're on like a whatever VPS.
I don't know that for sure, but
I don't know that either.
I'm sure it's on the website,
It's on the website, yeah.
wpbuffs.com.
But if I remember correctly, right, like sort of the maintenance space prefers that you have managed WordPress because it's easier to deal with your hosting provider if that's what happens. And so, there are some people who started making sites before managed WordPress really took hold of the market. And I am one of them, love the things that we know. But I think that really looking at managed WordPress today makes a lot of sense because it's super affordable and the scope of support is much larger and much more helpful for a WordPress website or a WordPress application, right? And then on top of that, we have the other innovations in addition to that, right? So that is where you can start looking at, we have managed WordPress on shared hosting, we have managed WordPress on dedicated servers, we have managed WordPress, and this is what we have at Nexus, right, on cloud hosting that dynamically allocates resources, so distributes the load across multiple boxes, right, and so on and so forth. And then we have different scopes of management for scalability, for security, for support, and for speed, right? So will your hosting product also include load testing, right? Like you have a big important campaign coming up. Some hosts, Nexus will do this, will allow you to open up a support ticket that, checks to make sure that you have the right resources for whatever simulated amount of traffic you're expecting to get on the real day. And so these differences in features are what drives the difference between sort of like your $10 a month managed WordPress hosting and your $40 a month managed WordPress hosting and your $110 a month managed WordPress hosting. It's things like that. And then we have the additional and final layer for now, right? That is managed application hosting for applications on top of WordPress, right? So that is what managed WooCommerce is. So when it comes to the managed commerce product at Liquid Web, that means that you're getting managed hosting. So we'll help you with permissions, we'll help you with security, we'll help you with, malware identification, whatever, all the server stuff. But we'll also touch that WordPress core installation and make sure that the problem's not sitting in there. And we will also look at the WooCommerce plugin itself to make sure that the issue that you're opening up a ticket about is not in the WooCommerce plugin itself. So now we've eliminated vendor hell, right? Because if you didn't have that, you would have to say, oh, my product page listings aren't showing, or they're not zooming in, or some JavaScript function is not working the right way. You open up a ticket with your host and they say, no, it's not that. You have to open up good luck finding WordPress support, right? Like, I don't know, open up a ticket with WP Buffs, I guess, if you have that plan, then you have to sign up for the plan. Or, you have to go on the WordPress.org forums, or you have to like find a group on Facebook. And then if the problem, and then they say, no, it looks like it's with the WooCommerce plugin. Look, this error is coming up in this one folder of the WooCommerce plugin. Then you have to open up a ticket with Automatic, right? And so now you don't have to do that, right? Like you have one product that includes that entire scope of support, and it'll be outlined on the product page and in your SLA. And then you have the different layers of support for that, right? So now there's many companies coming out with managed WooCommerce-like products, and at Nexus, that product also includes support and management and things like load testing, things like the dynamically allocated resources and support for all the products in the value-added bundle, right? And maybe some of the other hosts don't do that, and storage management, things like that. So long answer, but it's a big space to understand, right? And really understanding your options can save you a lot of heartache in the future.
Absolutely. So I feel like the sort of the TLDR of that is, it depends, right, on like what it is you need for the site that you have, and then what plan it is that you choose for the site that you have. It all kind of comes with different tiers and different layers of support. So like, what just struck out to me is, I feel like some people are not always aware that when you purchase hosting, you do have to find a company, or you should find a company like WP Buffs that maintains it for you. Like your hosting company is not, well, now a lot of them do automatic plugin updates, but they're not going to be like updating the content on your site. They're not going to be, doing, holding your hand really. And it's an interesting point that you bring up is, not every hosting package that you get is going to be, somebody, when you reach out to that support, it's not always going to be somebody that is like a WordPress expert who I remember at one point when I was starting out and I was talking to hosting support for a client of mine, and they said, like, the support person said to me in the chat, I don't know anything about WordPress. And I remember feeling like, what? Like, that was so unbelievable to me. But it's worth noting that, yeah, having something like a managed WordPress, I feel like what you're paying for is like that additional knowledge, right, of the
Right.
people that you're working with on the hosting side. So I think all of that is incredibly valuable to keep in mind when you're looking for hosting, when you're learning about hosting as well.
Yeah, the other TLDR, right, is read the fine print. That's a TLDR. It's really understand what you're getting and what you're paying for, right?
Yeah.
Where does the line of your managed WooCommerce support end and your freelance developer hourly rate begin? And where does where does your hosting company's managed WooCommerce support end and your WP Buffs plan begin? And where does your WP Buff plan end and your freelance developers hourly rate begin, right? And really having a sense for who to go to for what, and maximizing that balance of expenditure can really save a lot of heartache in the long run.
Absolutely. One question that I have, which was not asked to us, but I want to touch on it really quickly because you mentioned like shared hosting versus dedicated hosting. And I remember when I had clients that I would help shop for hosting, they asked that question all the time. What's the difference between shared, dedicated? What's the other one? VPN or VPS? Like, there, a lot of times on those sales pages, you'll see all this different terminology that may not make sense to someone right away. So can you give us kind of the cliff notes of like, what are the differences between those kind of basic levels of hosting?
Yeah, okay. That's a really good question, and actually something that we work really hard to educate on at Nexus, because looking at it as a duality, right, like shared or dedicated, is old. Throw that away. That's not what we have anymore. We have so many more options now, right? Like, that's like how it used to be, and it traumatized a lot of people. Right? And that's why clients ask about it, and that's why developers ask about it. They're like, but is it shared or dedicated? And why? Because one of the worst feelings in the world is when somebody else goes viral and your site goes down. Right? And so we got this like collective trauma over shared hosting. All that it means, and this is how I tell this when I explain it to like my dad, I'm like, you ever watch Silicon Valley? That like one plot line where they're like, we're going to pivot to making boxes. No, maybe not. There's this one plot line in Silicon Valley where they're going to pivot to making boxes, and it's a big joke. But the thing about the joke that is true is that even though our entire lives are and feel so online in every single way, every website, every single one lives somewhere physical. Right? So yeah. Every website lives somewhere physical. It doesn't feel like it because we have computers and we have all this innovation. But, Liquid Web owns data centers, right? That are actual physical buildings with keys, where actual physical servers live. And how we distribute those computing resources is where the web hosting innovation comes. And the most baseline version of it, right, was you signed up for a web hosting plan, which is basically renting out a little bit of space in one of those boxes. Okay, that was like the very first version of it, right? Like, you're not running it off of your computer in your basement right now. You're doing it on ours, and we can manage that server and make sure that it is secure and make sure that it is always on, right?
It's like renting a storage pod or something.
Right.
Keep all your extra stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Keep all your extra stuff, and your domain name is the key for access, right? And so we could rent out a same box to multiple people, shared hosting. And then, that comes with some complications. Like, if one person has an insecure site that allows for the server to be hacked, then everybody else's site kind of can struggle a little bit. Okay, that was the old paradigm of web hosting, though. That's really not the case anymore. But one of the ways in which we innovated on top of that was we said, well, for a higher price, we can offer dedicated hosting. Okay, cool. So you get the whole box. Awesome. Now, the other way we innovated on top of that is the virtual private server. So it's like a dedicated box through software. Okay, so we prevent that issue of the sort of kind of like lame situation where we're all sharing a box and, your neighbor lights their apartment on fire, everybody else's apartment goes on fire. Hope you had insurance, right? And then we have innovations on top of that, right? So then we got cloud hosting and container-based architecture that then says, well, we can make servers talk to one another. And then that way, the computing resources across multiple servers can all be allocated to one single digital property as they're needed and scaled back as they're no longer needed. So most of your higher end hosts, so Nexus, Liquid Web, Pantheon, Convesio, right, will have an infrastructure like that. WP Engine, Kinsta, Flywheel at certain levels they'll have different options as well, depending on how much you want to spend, right? And this is sort of like the most sort of basic, how I would explain it to my dad type situation, right? And there are different applications for different folks. Again, right, like I don't need, OpenStack on AWS for my one-page resume website, right? Like it's just it won't hurt, but I don't need it, right? And it might be a little bit too expensive, and it's not really required. Whereas if I was making money on that site, that would be a different situation. And so figuring out that cost versus benefit and reliability across different kinds of web hosting products can be a really great way to, again, save yourself a lot of heartache in the long run.
Absolutely. I love it. Let's see. Next question. This is probably going to be what am I trying to say? This is probably going to be kind of complicated to answer, or maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, we're getting into the questions that I haven't heard now. So
yes, we are. Vague. That's what I was looking for. This is kind of a vague question, so I'm interested to see how you tackle it. What is the biggest challenge with hosting e-commerce sites?
Okay. So yeah, that's everything. That's the real answer. Honestly, everything. Everything about hosting e-commerce sites is more complicated. Why? Because if you do anything wrong, you're losing money every second that you did that thing wrong.
Yeah.
And when you're hosting an e-commerce site, you want to do business with a company that understands that. There are many companies that will pride themselves on their uptime percentage, and the reality is that sites do go down, and having mostly uptime is great. But when you're running an e-commerce store and you're processing, hundreds, if not thousands of orders each day, tens of thousands of orders each day, that downtime is not like, oh, it's within our expected uptime. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, I'm losing money every second that this thing is not up. And so that can be a really good challenge, because you bring on smart and interested people who really care about being your partner in business, and then it can be good, or it can be bad because you need the people that you're working with to have the same kind of urgency that you do. So I think that's the biggest challenge with hosting e-commerce sites, because we could get into the nuts and bolts of all of it, but at the end of the day, things will go wrong with hosting e-commerce sites. Do you have a team on your side that understand that when hosting e-commerce sites, the little minutes, every single minute makes a big difference? So outside of that, though, I think things that you most commonly see are probably speed concerns. Oh my God. Probably speed, and sorry, my phone started ringing and I got distracted.
That's okay.
And scalability concerns, right? So when you're running an online store, we want those product listing pages to show up really quickly. We want to not be worried that when we do a launch of a new product that lots of people are really excited about, that they'll be able to order it. Something common that we see is a lot of hosts will rely on making sure that your site is has caching on it, but you want to make sure that caching is intelligent and has good rules that are intended for e-commerce. You never want to cache checkout site. You never want to cache other things that need real-time interaction. You never want to cache really even a shopping cart, right? And so does your host understand those nuances of managing the speed of your site with the fact that you're not just displaying content, but also running an application, right? Especially in the WordPress e-commerce context, because other e-commerce contexts tend to be a little bit different. But yeah, I gave you 3 examples though, and you can see how those examples all dial back to, does your hosting provider understand that e-commerce is a minute by the minute game?
So it sounds like kind of at the root of that is the competition of it, right? Like that if your store loads a second slower than somebody else's store, like they could grab that business, right? Because it's such a competitive, online purchasing is so competitive in so many different ways that every single iota of speed matters in that instance, more than it would in maybe like a service-based site or, you know, something else. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. And they all the 3 things you said, like, yeah, they all tie into each other in a way that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And with Nexus Managed WooCommerce, a big part of what my job is, right? And I'm telling you the funny story about how I was hired without a lot of web hosting expertise. I was hired for different skills. That's because the company was trying to focus on hiring people who understood how to grow online stores, right? Web hosting can be learned. But do we have people on the team working on this e-commerce hosting product that understand that underneath all of these decisions are actual real orders that provide actual real dollars to merchants?
Yeah. That actually leads into a future question. So I'm going to skip around a little bit. What encouraged you to work in website hosting? Which you sort of just answered a little bit, but I thought that was an interesting question that was kind of a little bit more personal, a little bit less about hosting, but I think it's an interesting, like, I know your background, like I know your professional background. So how did you end up at Liquid Web working in hosting?
Oh man, I'm so curious about the fact you were like, I know your professional background. Because I'm like, do I know my professional background? Am I real? I don't know. I mean, so the way that I ended up working at Liquid Web was my boss, Chris Lemma, offered me this job, right? But I don't think that's the answer that people are looking for. I wonder if there is a narrative there about my professional background. I got into WordPress in 2015. I've been making websites for longer than that, but it was WordPress that I particularly started looking at, being pretty involved with the business and entrepreneurship school at Florida State University. I met the person who would become my business partner, Josh Pollock, in Florida. And started out making freelance websites. I ended up getting a couple of jobs managing technology stacks for a couple of pretty large nonprofit organizations in New York City. And from there, started working with Josh on what would then be, in 2.5 years, Caldera Forms, which is a form building plugin for WordPress that right now has about 200,000 active installs, and it's a part of the Saturday Drive family of products, which includes Ninja Forms, SendWP, and a couple of other WordPress plugins. So that was really cool, to grow this plugin and sell it to somebody else. That was awesome. And I think at that point, I had worked in an agency context. I worked at a WordPress development agency for a little bit. I worked on the plugin and product side. I worked on the in-house development and nonprofit communication side. And I had worked the freelance job and the freelance WordPress thing. And the one thing I hadn't done was web hosting. And
So check.
yeah. Yeah. But I think that was really curious to me, right? Like, it was because of the first question. The first answer was all about how can web hosting change this game? And it's like, well, here's the thing. Agencies, plugins, nonprofit communications, they're all little satellites, but every single one of these spaces needs web hosting. So underneath all of it is web hosting. And to me, getting into this new space that's sitting underneath all of it and learning a ton about it and being able to tell you and to explain to my dad, how putting things on the internet actually mechanically works, is a really powerful piece of information to be armed with. Um, and for me, the appeal of it too was the impact, right? When you have a fantastic web hosting product, you can really make a difference in someone's site. And the managed WooCommerce product in particular was interesting to me because I remember working on Caldera forms, and I swear, right, like my blood boiled when somebody opened a support ticket with us and we had to be like, it looks like it might be your hosting plan. Like, you might want to reach out to GoDaddy and let them know about this. And then it just disappears into the nether, right? And like, did they talk to GoDaddy about it? And did GoDaddy tell them, no, it's Caldera Forms? And then, or GoDaddy told them, no, it's this theme. And then they reached out to the theme support, and the theme was like, no, it's, and that's crazy to me, right? Like, you're working on a website, you want to be able to get answers and get it to work so that you can just focus on making it beautiful and making it make sales and driving traffic to it. And so the idea of a fully integrated hosting product that included the hosting, WordPress, WooCommerce, and then in addition to that, Stripe for WooCommerce, PayPal for WooCommerce, several form plugins, Beaver Builder, and all this stuff. And it was all on the SLA. So then you could have just one spot to have the totally open source, totally flexible, super affordable, but not horrendously distributed type product. I was like, that's awesome. That's impact, right? And that was really attractive to me. So here I am.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I feel like I'm hearing you were dancing around hosting like your entire career. Like, oh yeah, I'll build websites. Oh yeah, I'll work on a plugin company. And like at the center of all of that is hosting. So it does kind of, I knew all that about you, but I never thought about that kind of almost natural progression that you took of like, all right, well, let's go to the foundation, right?
Yeah.
I know all this other stuff that's up here. Let me go to the foundation and work there and make that a better place.
Right.
And I think that
because
I think that has such like a trickle up quality, right? Like, if your hosting is good, that's going to affect every single other thing, which actually leads me into the next question that we have, which is kind of the opposite. As somebody asked, how much do changes in WordPress affect the hosting industry?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So again, I imagine that it must be very different to different hosts, but I'll tell you what it's like inside Liquid Web a little bit, right? Which is updates to WordPress and updates to any of the other products that we work with, right? Because keep in mind that we also bundle about $5,000 worth of premium plugins, themes, and apps into the managed WooCommerce product. So I'm looking at updates all across the board, across many, many, many different things, right? It's something that we have to constantly monitor. And we have to make sure that our platform is prepared, right? Like what a managed WordPress or managed WooCommerce host is essentially doing is just automatically deploying WordPress to stuff. So do updates to WordPress itself create conflicts with the stuff that we have that automatically deploys WordPress? We're constantly looking for that. A large part of product management is being abreast of the changes that come up and reading into them and potentially identifying problems and making sure that we lead the charge into testing to make sure that nothing goes wrong. One of the interesting things that you were saying about the last question that actually loops into this one is a lot of our job at a good web hosting company that cares a lot about what your experience is like is no news is good news.
Yeah.
Right? When you don't notice us, when you don't think about us, No,
Yeah.
your site's running, you're focusing on other stuff, right? And we're just in the background keeping the lights on and spinning all the plates, right? And updating all your plugins and themes in WordPress without you noticing. You mentioned something about plugin updates earlier, right? And one of the key features to manage WordPress and Upstack at Nexus is automatic updates with visual regression. So updates everything nightly, and then if it looks wrong on a visual regression test, then reverts and lets you know so that you can take a manual look, right? So in theory, if it all goes right, you hear nothing. You don't think about us. You don't see us. We're little elves that come into the night, right? And stay on top of WordPress updates and WooCommerce updates and Jilt updates and Glue updates and all the other updates to everything, vulnerabilities across multiple plugins, and we're constantly talking about them to make sure that you don't have to think about them. And that's what you're paying for when you pay for something like managed WordPress, as opposed to like a VPS where you host a bunch of your sites.
Mm-hmm. I love it. That's awesome. I'm really excited for this. Like, I saw this question come in and I was like, I can't wait to ask this.
Oh gosh, what's it gonna be?
Where do you see the future of WordPress hosting in the next 5 or 10 years?
That's so funny. It's actually so funny how frequently I've been asked, where do I see the future? I don't know what I'm having for breakfast tomorrow, like I'm just being honest with you, anybody who tells you that they know where the future of anything is going is lying. It's making stuff up. With that said, obviously, right, I have some opinions about what's going to happen that are penciled in.
Yeah, I want your hot takes.
And my hot takes, so one thing that I do think we're going to see is we're going to see more and more integration, right? Being someone that has been plugged into the ecosystem for a while, I remember when Liquid Web rolled out this managed WooCommerce product, there has been nothing like it in the market at the beginning of 2018. And I remember looking at the site and being like, oh my God, that's so cool, right? Like I didn't even work here, but I was just so excited about the that vendor issue that I was telling you about, right? Like how frustrating it was for me watching Caldera Form support tell people, I don't know, like open a ticket with your host. Or I was like, no, I hate that so much, right? So we're going to see more of that. In 2018, that was brand new. Liquid Web was leading the charge. And now we're seeing other companies also engage in the managed WooCommerce game. We're going to see more managed blah, blah, blah come out. Right? Because we have very well integrated and beautiful, seamless experiences that are also closed off and proprietary. And many people want that full flexibility and the affordability and all the goodness and stuff that WordPress provides without having to, be locked into an ecosystem. So your hosting companies are all going to come together and say, okay, well, let's put together packages for specific groups of people, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing versions of managed WooCommerce that are for e-learning, that are for what else? I don't know. Digital downloads that are for subscription and membership sites. I think that is probably something that we're going to start seeing. On the other hand, so we'll see the bundling continue to intensify, and then some people will say, oh, sorry, I totally just got distracted.
That's okay.
So some people will continue on the bundling trend. Some people will say, you know what, we're not doing that. So then the other thing that we're going to see is debundling and focus on infrastructure, right? So there's still a lot of issues with web hosting, right? Like keeping stuff online consistently is harder than you'd think. And so we're going to see a lot more of people stripping away all of that extra support and stuff like that, and instead just focusing on innovating infrastructure and figuring out how to get companies like WP Buffs to fill in the gap of the support and stuff like that, right? So I think that we'll see that, especially as cloud hosting, container-based architectures become more and more common. That's going to become the standard, right? Like we're quickly going to forget that weird world we used to live in where it was shared versus dedicated hosting. And instead, we're all going to get used to dynamically distributed resources across multiple plans across multiple sites to make sure that everything's sort of getting the computing power that it needs as it needs it.
I love that. That's awesome. Cool. All right. So I only have one more question for you. I think I actually know who sent in this question. You might know who sent in this question. What Taylor Swift song should I be listening to when selecting a web host? That is a actual question that somebody sent in through our. We had questions sent in through our form, and we had the team at WPBuff send in a couple of questions as well, and that one came in anonymously through our form. What Taylor Swift songs should I be listening to when selecting a web host?
So funny! Oh my gosh. Okay, so WordCamp Austin is doing, and why? Yeah. WordCamp Austin is doing that Musicians of WordPress feature, and just before we went on air, I was asking Ali, what should I submit? There's just a straight hour of Taylor Swift covers. I'm like, that's actually a great idea. That would be so funny. For people not watching, yes, one of the most embarrassing facts about me, so embarrassing, honestly, is that I am a total Swiftie. I'm a Taylor Swift stan. I am. And the worst part about it is I didn't dislike her, but I didn't feel any particular sort of way about her for most of the time she spent, taking over pop music. And it wasn't until I was living in Pittsburgh. I was in Pittsburgh for 7 months. We set up an office for Caldera in Pittsburgh. And I remember I was in a meetup group, and somebody posted to the meetup group. They were like, oh, by the way, I have this random Taylor Swift ticket. It's $40 if anybody wants it. And I was like, whatever, but $40 to see the highest grossing female recording artist of all time. I love live music. I hadn't been to, Pittsburgh has that really cool, the Steelers Stadium. It's called the Heinz Stadium, and it's, a big landmark. So it was kind of okay, this kind of checks off a lot of boxes for me. Just a random Taylor Swift concert, no big deal. I went, no expectations, and I walked out a stan. I was like, oh my God, what?
The power of live music.
The power of live music and openness to new experiences. So to answer the question, I think that as you purchase a Nexus managed WooCommerce plan, the Taylor Swift song you should be listening to, that you should put on as you initiate the checkout process, should be... I'm looking at Spotify.
This is an important question. You've got to get it right.
You should play Love Story. It's a love story,
liquid
baby,
web
just
story.
say yes. Yeah, So play that through the checkout process. It'll take you right through, and then you're obviously going to have to do the work of canceling. Oh, wait, you're going to have to request a free white glove migration from our Nexus support team, which you can do by just sending an email to support. And so while you request your migration, obviously you should be listening to Style. We never go out of Style. Yes, the migration will happen automagically. It'll just be done by the migration text. And then, last but not least, you will have to cancel your old hosting plan with your existing host. And for that, obviously, the song you should start playing as you begin to create the cancellation ticket is We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together by Taylor Swift. So there you go. There is your Taylor Swift playlist for opening up a new hosting plan.
I love it. That was perfect. We got 3 songs for the price of 1. That was awesome. Well, like I said, that was our last question. So we're going to end off there. Thank you so much, Christie. I learned a whole lot. I hope that everybody watching has learned a whole lot. Where can people find you or get in touch with you if they have any more questions about web hosting or manage WooCommerce with Liquid Web or Taylor Swift or, anything else that you know a lot about?
Absolutely anything that you want to know about, whether it's about WordPress, WooCommerce, web hosting, Taylor Swift, Caldera Forms, the WordPress ecosystem. Like I said, I've kind of worked all the different jobs now, right? I've done the freelance web thing, and I've done the in-house staff thing, and I've done the agency thing, and I've done the web hosting thing, and I've done the product thing. So any questions that I can help with, I'm super available. ChristieChirinos.com. You can find my email and all my social media stuff there. If you are on Twitter, I'm pretty available on Twitter. My DMs are generally open most days. So you can just send me a question about whatever might be going on. You can post it publicly, send it privately. I try to make it a point to answer. Sometimes the filters do catch stuff, but most of the time they shouldn't. And of course, through the Nexus website, nexus.net/WooCommerce, you won't find my email on there, but, if you open a support ticket and you're like, I need to talk to Christie Chirinos, it'll get to me.
Sounds good. Perfect. Alrighty, so it is time to pick our random giveaway winner. Yay!
Woo!
Somebody is going to win any item they want out of the WP Buff store. So I opened up a random number generator here, generated a random number, and picked that person out of our subscriber list. And that person is number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Roslie, Roslie. It does not look like they're here in our Zoom call right now, but we will send them an email and get them their info. Awesome. And if they don't reply, we might pick somebody else. Cool. So our next WPAMA is going to be announced later on today. We're going to be announcing it on social media. Make sure you go to wpbuffs.com/WP-AMA-series to submit your question for that person. Questions are first come, first serve. So by being signed up, by being subscribed to our list, your questions actually get the front of the line since you find out before everyone else. And you're also automatically entered to potentially win a prize if you are signed up in that list as well. Like I said before, this episode will be available to watch on our YouTube channel, WP Buffs. If you missed any portion of this, captions will be included on that video. And if you want to find out any more about us, go to WPBuffs.com. Find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, by searching WP Buffs. That's all, folks. Have a good one.
Woo! Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Bye-bye, everybody.